Well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce what's happening here. We may or may not have a lot of people. We had a lot more views on YouTube than we had live attendance last time. So it is what it is. The whole concept here, I'm Ben. I'm an instructor with Flatiron. I've been with Flatiron for 4 years, over 4 years. Mostly as a technical coach, but most recently as an instructor. And the concept of these events is really to give students a chance to see what live coding looks like in a non-stressful way. So you're just an observer, there's no pressure, you're not, you don't have to do anything. So that's kind of the spirit of it. Demetrio, well, I'll let Demetrio introduce himself.
Yeah, my name's Demetrio. I'm also an instructor here at Flatiron. Um, I've been coding now for a little over 2 years professionally. Um, but I've also kind of learned coding back in my university days, about 10, 11 years ago,
Cool.
before I went to culinary arts for 10 years.
Yeah. So you've done a few different things.
Yeah.
Um, so the whole spirit of this is just wanting to help people prepare, especially for phase one. That's why we're advertising heavily in the phase one channel. That's your first review. Live coding is like kind of something that's kind of hard to prepare for if you don't even know what it looks like, and just want to give people a chance to see what it looks like. In particular, the kind of breakdown of the pseudocoding and the problem solving. If possible, well, I'll ask Demetrio to kind of think out loud. That's not necessary for you as a student when you're live coding, but it is a good, if you can get to that space, it's nice to be able to kind of articulate what's happening. So you're opening up the black box so people can see inside. And the larger picture, of course, is that this program is not about getting you a piece of paper. It's about getting you a job. And so technical interviews are a very stressful and difficult part of that process. And so this is our attempt at Flatiron to give you some meaningful preparation and practice on the way to that moment where you'll be interviewing. Anything you want to add, Demetrio?
No, I mean, all the practices I'll be implementing today are going to be practices I always recommend to all my students. Talking out loud, pseudocoding, asking clarifying questions are all pieces that I always tell every student after an assessment, before an assessment, and, hope that you guys carry away what I teach you or what I implement today.
Cool. So at this point, we're gonna jump into our role playing. I'm gonna send Demetrio the link and pretend like I'm an instructor. And we just finished the first part of the assessment, which is he's talked about his project. He answered some conceptual questions. Okay, so we're done with the first part of the project review. And now I want you to go ahead and click on the link and go ahead and share your screen. So just to talk through the live coding a little bit with you to help you understand what it is, right? It's a preparation for that technical interview. It's okay if you feel nervous. It is kind of nerve-wracking to have somebody watching you code. It's essentially a performance of sorts. What you'll see there is you have the index HTML, and it's a pretty simple thing. On the right in Replit, you've got the little built-in web view so that you don't have to switch back and forth between tabs. You can if you want. The script.js is where all the fun is going to happen. We've got a array of beverages, and then I've got a paragraph that describes what I want you to do. So the way I like to do it first time for students is, give them a chance to read and then break down that dense paragraph into some pseudocode. And I'll support you in the pseudocode phase where, I'll let you take the lead, but if you kind of totally miss steps or you're got things jumbled up, I'll try to get you straight so we have a good plan of action that you can tackle.
Sounds great.
Little side note, this is more complicated than a real live coding challenge would be, just in terms of the number of steps, but I knew Demetrio could handle it. So I'm going to the
I
kitchen.
think I can. Let's hope I can today.
All right, here we go.
So first things first, I would obviously read out the question. So what we got here is make a button that fires off a function when clicked. The function will grab input from the input in the form and create a new beverage with that name and an ID which follows on from the last one in the beverages array. You should make up all the other data that goes into the new beverage object. As evidence that beverage was created, you change the statement in the counter div to have the new number of beverages. This should be done dynamically so that if another beverage is added, the number is updated again. You should also add a message to the DOM that says in an H2 tag that a new beverage called variable was created and added to the beverages array. If a second beverage is added, a new message shows up and the old one disappears. All right. So it's a lot. Even me just reading this right off the bat, I'm slightly confused. So I'm going to immediately start trying to break this apart by sentences first. So that's easier for myself to read it. And kind of break it apart where I think it makes sense, at least initially. So this seems like kind of 4 major groups of problem solving that I need to do. And first thing I see, got to make a button that fires off a function when clicked. I also see that right here, I have a new button here as a tag over in my beverage factory over here. So kind of the first thing I would do is ask, am I allowed to manipulate anything here in the HTML as well? Or should I strictly stick to JavaScript?
That's a good clarifying question. I think it's fine if you want to just delete add new button here, but I'd like you to add the button using JavaScript.
Okay, not a problem. So that tells me that I need to also get a couple of selectors here to get me each individual thing that I'm going to need. So the first selector I already know is I'm going to need this button spot selector. So kind of can make that assumption based on that information that was just given to me. So I'm going to name it button spot, do query selector. Don't forget about document. And I'm searching for an ID of button spot. I believe that's how it's spelled. I could always copy and paste it if I need to. But yeah. So that tells me I can get that in there. And if I need a new button for adding a new beverage, then I would probably do, I have to create that button. So before I actually jump into creation of something, I think I want to like start slowly breaking this down because I think I'm jumping ahead of myself. I might lose focus if I do that. So first I need to like break down these into manageable bytes. So make a button that fires up a function when clicked is very general. And so I'm going to kind of write my pseudocode to make a little bit more specific details here. Yeah. So step 1, create button to a, and I'm going to create it to a variable and call that variable add beverage. Add beverage button. I'm going to need to add an event listener to it. And I'm going to need to append it onto the button spot in some shape or form. Do you want me to use the append method, or would you rather me use like inner HTML since I'm trying to kind of replace, I guess, the add new button text here?
Yeah, I'll leave that up to you. I mean, both ways can get the job done for sure.
Cool. So the kind of second part of the second step here also tells me that I need to have a callback function that fires off some function we haven't named yet. And I'm going to guess that function here is going to be this function. So in order to kind of help open up this space for myself, I'm going to do this like 2a bit, just to open how this is going to look for me. So this function is supposed to grab the input. So we're still probably working within the form at this point. So maybe I'm not adding my event listener to the button itself. Maybe I'm adding it to the form. Maybe the button is supposed to be correctly for my form here. So
Well, like many things, there's multiple ways to accomplish stuff. I think the key is that when it's clicked, the event listener gets fired off. So you can do that however you feel is best.
yeah. So yeah, I need this to kind of fire off. So I'll focus on these first steps first to kind of give myself a place to start. So I'm going to do add beverage button. I'm going to actually shorten it to what I wrote. And it's going to be like that. Create element. And because I'm creating an element, I need to name that element. And in this case, it's going to be a button. Now, this button needs some inner text. And I'm going to make the inner text add new drink. And then add bev button needs this add event listener. And it's going to be a submit. I'm going to take it and I'm going to have my callback function, which I'll have as add new drink. And since I am not 100% sure what that function does, I'm not going to pass anything just yet. But I do need to create that function. So, oh, and before I even add, well, let me create it. And before I do all of that, don't forget the needs of your kind of functions. And what I'm going to do is just have it console log clicked for now. I think I might need E just because it is a submit. So E.prevent defaults, just to make sure I don't refresh the page. And I'm going to run this to test this first bit out. Oh, I didn't get, there's already an error I'm getting. And I access add you drink before initialization. So let's move this down below here. And I'm forgetting one other thing, and that's that I haven't appended it. So let me append my button here. Because otherwise I won't see it. And I got the button here. I'm going to add that new drink. And despite me doing that prevent default, it still ended up refreshing, which is not what I wanted to happen. So let me change this to a click just to get that refresh out of the way here. This last thing I want to do is get it to happen over and over again. Ooh, interesting. Click is not defined. Oh, well, that explains a bit. I ended up putting it as a variable instead of an actual string. So now, still refreshing, It's probably because it's on the form itself. So maybe I do need that form. And it's going to be document query selector. And I need to find the form itself. So I copy this so I could just make that easier for myself and just place this into here. And now, instead of on the button itself, now I'm doing the add event listener. First, let me bring that back in because I accidentally deleted something I didn't want to. I'm just going to bring form here. Insert submit here. Bring in my E once again, my E.prevent default once more. So gonna run. Average piece of null of add event listener. Form is coming out as null for some reason. Oh, it's probably because I forgot this bit. I forgot about using the ID here. And since I forgot that, I forgot this hashtag. So this should no longer be null. And now every time I click, it at least launches and does what I want it to do for now. Cool. So now that I've done that, I've kind of finished this piece so far. And I'll mark that off by just erasing that pseudocode for now.
Yeah, and let's just pause, Demetrio. If there's any questions, Kara or Kat, this give Demetrio a chance to, take a breath. That was some good work, good reading of errors and things. Any questions from the peanut gallery before we jump into the second part of the challenge? We may not get through it all in half an hour, and that's totally fine. This is, again, a much more complicated series of tasks than you would have to do for your own live coding challenge.
I guess I had a question. I think Demetrio, you had it on your event listener, you had it a click event, and then you had it as a submit event, and then I think you changed it again. I was just wondering what, can you tell me about that? Or,
Yeah,
I mean, well, there's two different events, but.
Yeah, so originally, because I added this button to the form itself, right? Since this button's now located in here.
Yeah.
No matter when it's clicked or submitted, it will cause a re-render when pressed because the form is always searching as well for an event.
Okay.
And so the form itself is refreshing the page. And I thought that I could try to get away with it by using click.
Okay.
And that wasn't the case. The form is still searching for the event listener.
Okay.
So I decided to instead use the event listener on the form itself, which is already doing that search for us, do the event.prevent default, and then I'm able to like get the click finally in.
Okay.
My console log.
Okay.
And that's pretty tricky. And I actually didn't plan for that to happen. I should have put the button spot outside of the form because I intended it to just be a normal click. So when it started refreshing on the click, I was like, oh my God, what's Demetrio? But he figured it out. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
But you saw how I like tested through all the possible scenarios, like, okay, let me switch this to a click.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work as a click. Then I switched it back to a submit and focused on the form instead of focusing on the button.
Cool. Because
So,
you could tell it wasn't doing what you wanted and you knew that wasn't why.
Yeah, it wasn't the behavior of a normal button. So
Mhm.
my mind already told me something's not going according to plan, not because of my own fault, but because of I'm using the wrong element.
Okay.
All right.
And that can be very challenging as a student because without a lot of experience and confidence in yourself, you start immediately making assumptions about other things being broken. And that's just hard at the beginning because you know, and that's part of why we do this, because in a technical interview, you need to be able to rely on a sense of inner confidence that like, I do know what I'm doing. I know I can make this work. I don't need to panic. I just need to work through the possibilities.
Right.
And I've written so little code at this point that there's only few possibilities of what might be wrong, right? Because a query selector is always going to be query selecting. A create element will always create an element according to what you're picking. And in this case, like there's nothing else that would have seemed wrong with my code. And so that's why I'm mostly focused on the event listener aspect here.
Okay.
And why this might not have been working as intended.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's put a little time pressure on Demetrio.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can get done in 8 minutes here.
All right. So
And
I
that-
know my function to grab my input, the input from the form, create a new beverage with that, and an ID that follows from the last one of the beverages to make up new data here in this array up above. So a real quick way to do this and explain this is I'm going to write quick pseudocode here. And what I'm going to write is callback function, add new drink, needs some info from the input that we can grab from the form. It needs the last element of the array so that I can use that element to properly like get that last ID. And then assign a new drink object with that ID, as well as, I guess, create new data for the description. Now I notice, and I'm going to make this quick question for you, Ben. I noticed we don't have an input for our description. Should I enter in that input myself?
Yeah, in the instructions, it says make it up. So you're going to make up the other attributes. There's actually 3 of them: tagline, first brood, and description.
Gotcha. So description input. So I've been told I need to create those. So before I even get to this, I'm going to have another pseudocode of create input elements for description, tagline, and first brood. And I'm going to kind of repeat this process over and over. So what you're going to see me do is just write one out, document.create element.
Oh, I don't want you to create input boxes. Just literally create a string that you can add as the attributes. Yeah.
Gotcha. I thought you meant you wanted me to have those inputs, so I was going to make them real quick.
No.
That's totally fine. So since that's the case, I don't really need to make those as input elements. I just need to have that information when I create it. So just create new data for the description, tagline, and the first brood. All right. So real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first target my form, right? So e.target, which represents my form right off the bat. Now, instead of just value, I need to get the value of the input within it. And I need to basically get this input's information. In order to do that, I might actually have to do a query selector for that. Or I could maybe do console log here and see if I get something within this console log of e.target to help me out here when I run this. So it does show me the whole entire piece. Shows me type text, but I don't know if that's how I'm going to grab it. I just put .input. So I'll give it a try, but I don't have a guarantee there. Gives me undefined like I was kind of expecting. So I might have to do query selector. And then in there, I'm doing input. Since there's only one input, yep, that helps me grab what I'm looking for. So what I can do here now is a dot value to get whatever that value is. Erase this console log and do a let input value is equal to this. And if I were to console log this, this would give me whatever value is entered in here. So in order to make sure that's true, so everyone witnesses it, I'm going to do input value. I'm going to press run. Here, I'll put in like, 3s. And then when I add new drink, comes up in the console log proving that I got the value that I was looking for. Cool. So now that I got that value, I need to insert this value into an object. So I'm going to actually do create a new object, so new drink object. And in this object, it needs to imitate my objects over here. So I'm going to do a quick copy here because I know eventually this is what I'm going to need. But I don't want to just leave it at this format right now. I want to make it something that is usable for me right now. The name input are going to be two different things here. So the water at least aspect here, I'm going to change that into input value because that's the value that I eventually want to insert there. And this is going to be the array that I have above beverages. So, but not quite just that. So beverages, last beverage ID is what I want, right? The last bev ID going to equal to beverages. And we're going to do -1 because that should be the last element in our array. And this will be .id. And then actually before I actually test this object out, let me test this ID out. And then when I run this, click, I didn't get the ID as I was expecting. So why is that the case? Did I misspell beverages? No. Let's just get this for now. Let's see if we can get the actual last item. So no, it's not -1. What I could do is beverages.length -1. And that should give me my last elements. Yep, it gives me my last element. So, and now I'm going to try the ID. Boom, I'm getting 5. So now this, I can unclick here, or uncomment here, and I can do last bev ID +1. That should work. So now I'm going to actually move this console log all the way down below and test my new drink object to make sure that it now creates, number 6 here for the object itself. And I didn't put any input in there. That's why it has no name. So now I need to add this object to the array and add it to my assign the new drink object with that ID and create new data for the description tagline. So I'm just gonna, just put Fizz Buzz here as random info. And then here, tastes great, just to have some new info in there. I assume that I want to add this into beverages. So beverages dot push into my array. And that should add in this element into this array when it's clicked. It should continuously add in new items in there when I do that. So now that I've done that, I need to now, as evidence was created, you change the statement in the counter div.
Well,
So
let's just console log the beverages somewhere and
Yeah.
then show that part's working, and then we can ask everybody if they want to continue on. And of course, if you have somewhere to be, then we can call it a day. That was great.
Yeah, so I'm gonna name this one this time Brooklyn. And we now have 6 elements in our array. And our 5th one is first brewed, unknown because I didn't fill that in. Name is Brooklyn, Fizz Buzz is the tagline, description tastes great. So I was able to successfully get it into there.
Yeah, looks good. So, Kara, Kat, do you have any questions? Do you want to watch? Well, first, I guess I should ask Demetrio if he has time to continue on.
I do have time to continue on.
Okay, well, if anybody needs to leave, I'm going to give you one more chance to ask any questions. We will post this video on YouTube and then get it into the channel. So
I had one question about on line 24, the e.target.query selector, the input is in quotes. I thought if it was a query selector, it also had to have the hashtag. Does it not need it there because you're using dot notation around it? Or
yes, I totally understand your question. So query selectors can represent almost anything that we are looking for. In this case, if you leave it blank and you search for just any old element, it'll pick the first element that it finds. So in this case, we're searching a random input.
Okay.
And because there's only one input, I can almost guarantee that this is going to be the input I'm searching for.
Okay.
If I did like either dot notation, which would represent a class, or I did this, that would represent ID. So it's really depending on what you're searching for.
Okay.
That's why you have some of my query selectors that needed this, because I was searching by ID. But at times you're not going to need that because you'll have this ability to use like for a general case.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
yeah, and again, I made that harder than it should have been by not putting an ID in there, so that he had to go through the form to try to get to it. Might have been, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but of course, in the live coding, you can use official documentation. That there's plenty of ways to solve the problem of how do I get the input out of that form. And so it might have been a place to use a search method if you didn't think of that using a query selector, a search like get input from form or something like that, and just kind of see what documentation is out there.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hit it.
Yeah, so I feel like I finished almost all of this and might have already started getting into the next piece. So I'm just going to erase this once again, just to make my stuff a little bit smaller and focus on this next piece. So as evidence that you were created in the counter div, so I got to update this counter div that's happening here and get that to 6. So this should be done dynamically. So if another beverage is added, the number is updated again. So what I want to happen after this is for the number of beverages in the length here to go up here. So I don't feel like there's a lot of pseudocode that I need to have happen here, but I'll write some out anyway. So what I'm going to write out here is need to update counter found within, and I need to actually check where that counter exists. Oh, it has an ID of counter. So here I need to update the counter found within counter. And I'm going to actually put the hashtag here so I can remember that it's actually an ID. Beverages count must go up by the number of, by the length. I'm going to actually say by the length of the beverage array. Like if some miracle we're submitting multiple at a time and I submit 2, then that should actually represent 7 instead of just 5. Or, you know, it shouldn't just go up by 1. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually call on another function here. So I'm not pushing everything into one place here. So first thing I got to do is do a query selector, as I must for my different elements. I'll name this one counter element, and I'll shorten it to counter L. Query selector. Here, I know that as below, I want it to be counter. I almost forgot my quotations. Again, try not to forget these when you're declaring your items, your quotes in the proper places, your everything is in the proper place before you feel like it's finished. So now, in a new function that I'll call over here, I'll call this function update counter. And all I'll do is call it. So update counter, I'll represent this. And for now, I'm going to actually just console log the array itself to make sure that it does actually update properly after this, and that I'm going to have that information when I go in here. So I'm going to click run. You know, I'm going to click in this time 3, add that new drink, and it does update in there. So cool. Now my counter here, I actually need to check what the, like I need to check the inner text, make sure that it's actually the proper inner text that I'm expecting. So I'm going to do that as well. And yes, it's the actual text I was expecting. Now I know that I'm going to end up having to replace the inner text. So actually don't need this console log. So the inner text is going to actually be what I will take as this sentence. But we want to change something about this sentence, because this won't be represented anymore. This will now be beverages dot length. And that should update my array or that counter when I type into it. And it does. And if I were to do a new one, let's say we go for delirium, which I forgot how to spell delirium for a second. It does go up to 7, so my counter works. Any questions before I move on to the next step that I'm planning on going to?
Very cool. Yeah.
Awesome. So now I have that going for me. And I also need to create a message to the DOM that says in an H2 tag that a new beverage has been called. The new beverage that I created has been added to the beverages array, and then so on and so forth for every new drink that I'll get. So I'm going to define that like this. And I know I'm using like multi-comment messages, and I know that for the most part, Replit doesn't really care about it, but I like using multi-comments for my personal pseudocoding. I need to, like, in a function, I need to change or create an element. I don't actually know what these elements are yet, if there aren't any of there, that changes a message based on when I update the beverage array. Now this is super vague, and I don't even know if change or create element. So let me check that HTML again. Cool, we actually do have a div already, but I'm also noticing that it wants me to say it an h2 tag, and I noticed that that is actually a div. So I'm going to call on that div as a kind of const, let's see, message div dot query selector. I'm going to have that be the, I'm going to guess ID of message, but I might be wrong because, again, I'm not really looking at it. I'm going real fast here. It is an ID. Cool. So now message div has been declared. I should be able to update certain things there. So I need to change a new element that I create, not really the message div. So I need to change an element that I created. And I can kind of like delete that. And it updates when I update the beverage. So that's kind of a little bit more specific now. I'll call this function update message. And this function is going to need to take in an argument, I believe. Since we're creating this new drink, I might as well pull it when we push it into the array. So I'm going to actually take that new drink object in. And since I'm going to have the new drink object, I can even destructure this. And just pull out the name that I have. So that when I create this function, all I have to deal with is the one element that I'm really manipulating for now, unless I need more information about it. And so this should update the element that I create. I should probably have that element that I create already inside of that message div. Because since it's already something that I want to continuously update only when I update the counter, it means it should already exist. So I'm going to do that right away over here. Const message h2. And we're going to do document.create element. And that element is going to be a h2. And we are going to append it kind of similar to like we did with the button in the button spot. And message div dot append this message h2. So even if I run this, it's not really going to show anything. I accidentally misspelled query selector. So that even just running this helped me see that before I even continued going. And so I'll never actually physically see it, but if I were to go to elements, I might even see it in elements. If I do the query selector here and do like message div, or actually message h2 dot inner text, and assign that to like, I don't know, grape. Oh, well, always make sure quotations. I've been forgetting this apparently. So in quotations for my strings, press enter, and grape does appear on the page. So since I know that will work, I know that this, as long as I have message, put caps lock, message h2 dot inner text to name, then that should appear on the page. So let me go ahead and create that real quick. So const update message. I already mentioned that I wanted to accept an argument. So that argument is going to be an object, and within that object, I actually just want to pull the name. And here, they told me the message that I want it to be, and that is this message. So I copied that real quick, and I'm going to change message h2 dot inner text to equal to this sentence. Now, if I do it like this, it's not going to appear right away. And I think oh, okay, cool. That is running exactly how I expect. I'm trying to change this variable and change that to name. Now, I do need to run this update message, and that's only going to be when I run the click of the form. So when I click run, now when I add in this new situation, I was able to get my message. And that looks like it's the end of the challenge. And just to make sure, because you told me that the old message needs to disappear, I changed this now to grape. This has been switched to grape, and we saw the beverages go up.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah, you did a great job. That was awesome. And it's one of the things I think is interesting is that the way of solving the problem is definitely not what I imagined, but it was very concise and like to the point. I was going to use inner HTMLs and clear things, but that's the great thing about coding is there's always lots of ways to solve problems. Kat, Carrie, you guys have any questions before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think I was thinking, Ben, what you were just saying about like clearing a form or whatever, like how Demetrio had a new beverage called 3 was created, and then he typed in grape, and then it just updated to grape. But I guess that was done without like having something that cleared the form. But I guess it makes sense because it will just because of string interpolation, it just puts the new name in every time. And I guess that is a way of clearing it. Is that kind of how?
Yeah. So inner text and inner HTML are very similar in which they've replaced whatever's inside of there. So, there are a little bit in the destructive capability in terms of element like creation, element manipulation, where even if I were to switch this to like inner HTML right now, right, what's going to happen is that it doesn't like append. So when we normally think of like changing either inner text or inner HTML, it doesn't actually like append the information, right?
Okay.
So when we do this, it gets added, right? And when I switch to grape, it just changes the text in there anyway.
I see.
It changes the elements inside of there anyway.
Right. So it's like a false change in a way.
Yeah. So if I would have changed this to like append, right? What you'll notice is that when I run this and I put in 3, it adds the 3. And then when I put in grape, it puts the new one right out. Because the append is just putting things on the page.
Right.
So like if there's a string, it'll place the string in there.
Okay.
If it was an LI, it'll put the LI down.
Okay.
Inner text and the inner HTML aren't saying, hey, add in this new thing. They're saying this attribute is now going to equal this. It's now assigned to this.
Right.
I'm taking an advantage of that kind of built-in attribute to the elements
Yes.
and just using the inner text or inner HTML to my advantage there.
Okay.
And I don't need to clear anything beforehand because it's already clear
Right.
or it's replaced.
That's so cool. Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? I know there's like a lot that I've written here and even some things that I would have done slightly differently, but yeah.
Yeah, and I like how you brought destructuring in. You know, that's kind of a minor topic in phase 1, but it becomes pretty big in phase 2 when you're destructuring props. So that's nice to kind of preview that. And I like the way that you explained it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, really appreciate your time, Demetrio. Not surprised that you knocked that out of the park. And we'll get this uploaded and posted in phase 1. So if people want to watch it again or try it up for their own purposes, I could post the replit too. Maybe, I don't know, make it public or observable or something. But yeah, thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. That was
Thank
great.
you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.